Hello. Refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants. Europe is bursting at the seams. Yes. Oh, and I have an echo. Sorry about that, but I need to kill some sound. There we go. And tonight we talk about immigration in Europe, the UK, the Netherlands, and the rest of Europe. I do that with Ian. Run the titles. Hello, Ian. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad, Hein. Thank you for getting me back again.
Welcome. We've had interesting news in the UK about boats for asylum seekers and other rubbish. What's been going on?
Yeah, it without question, it's not been one of our proudest moments. We definitely have not covered ourselves in glory with this one. It was a combination of the Foreign Office and the Home Office have decided between them that what they want to do is to basically stuff immigrants or migrants or asylum seekers or pretty much anyone that arrives in the UK into one of these. I think it's probably fairest to describe it as a prison barge. It's not really going to be an accommodation barge the same way that it was when it was in service as an oil company's sort of provision for its employees, because what they've effectively done is they have massively overstuffed it in terms of capacity. So I think from memory, it takes about 250 people, or it has 250 rooms, and they have doubled up the capacity. They've stuffed extra beds into every single room to double up the capacity to about 500. And of course, worse than that, and goes without saying that when you stuff a lot of people into a small area, there is going to be a very, very high chance of transmission of disease and unsanitary conditions and so on. But before they even managed to get started on filling this thing properly, they discovered that the water had been left for so long that it had developed Legionnaires or Legionella bacteria. So they've had to abandon this. They've had to evacuate this prison barge, and I'm fairly certain I saw in the Private Eye publication, which is a wonderful satirical news source if anyone is uncertain what I'm referring to, but they indicated that actually for the cost that we are paying to basically import and house this barge and so on, we could actually send 500 people, 500 migrants on a Disney cruise for a year.
Good grief.
Yeah. It would cost us less to treat them like that. And this is the absurdity, is that this isn't something that we are doing because we can't afford to treat these people properly. It's not something that we're doing because it is a cheaper thing for us to do and we're protecting the taxpayer. It is more expensive to lock them up in this way, or almost lock them up in this way, than it would be to actually treat them to a holiday of a lifetime.
Yeah. It's silly, of course, but what I'm really wondering is there something like a plan here in the US government in what Mrs. Braverman's doing and etc.?
It's really, really difficult to tell because they're constantly saying that this is, a temporary thing and so on. But the reality is that the problem has come from the fact that they are not processing asylum applications correctly. I was looking at some numbers earlier today, and over the last 5 years, there have been 100,000 people who have arrived in the UK on small boats. So those are the ones that are getting all of this press attention. For starters, that represents 0.03% of the UK population a year. So even on the assumption that they all just got arrived and told, yeah, you can live in the UK, you can stay here indefinitely, permanent right to remain, all that sort of stuff. As a population, we basically wouldn't notice. They just, it would be a blip in the census. That would be it. But on top of that, of those 100,000 pounds, of those 100,000 migrants that have come to the UK in the last 5 years, 92% of them have put through applications for asylum, which means 92% of them at least are asylum seekers. They're not illegal migrants. They're not economic refugees or whatever you want to call them. They're asylum seekers. And that means that we should be treating them with a certain level of dignity, and we should be acting as a responsible country looking after them, and we're not. Of those applications, from what I gather, about 76% are approved when they are finally passed through the system. So, on that basis, the vast majority of these 100,000 people that have come to the UK have come here for completely legitimate reasons, and we accept those reasons.
Yeah.
The rest, so the 24% or thereabouts, fine. They have come here under false pretenses, or they've cheated the system, or whatever. I will not draw any sort of conclusion as to why they've done what they've done, why they have decided to risk their lives coming over to the UK. The important thing is that a process has been followed which has determined that those individuals should not be granted asylum. But that is less than a quarter of the ones that have actually been processed. And of that, that is 92% of the 100,000 that have come across. This is, frankly, an enormous embarrassment for the UK. What we are effectively saying is, the majority, the average person who comes across on a small boat is perfectly entitled to do that. And our politicians have spent an enormous amount of time and money demonizing them and trying to turn this into, dog whistle politics. They've genuinely tried to demonize these people who have next to nothing and are looking for a little bit of help.
Yep. What a mess.
Yes. And in answer to your question, no, I don't think there is a plan. I think that they are just hoping that they can mess this up for as long as possible so that a general election comes along and it's up to the next government to sort it out. I really don't see how anything that they're doing could possibly go any further than that. I think it is literally just, it's performative politics for the sake of making life difficult for the next government and nothing more.
Yeah, that sounds about that. I mean, when you can do something for less money, as Toys Falsey says, why can't humans act humanely?
It would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Well, humans can, but the current Westminster government is definitely incapable of that.
Well, yes, and I would say that the majority of people understand that actually anyone else in need needs to be helped out, and it is, it's a very, very small proportion of people that take a stance that actually these people should be punished for daring to be in a horrible situation. The classic sort of example that I can think of, as you probably know, I am fairly active on the absolute cesspool that is Twitter. I saw a right-wing sort of pollster issuing a poll on there that basically says, should the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, should they? No, I don't mean mean X. I mean Twitter, because X is a stupid name. But the question was, should the RNLI save migrants who are drowning in the Channel or not?
Yeah.
And even in the most biased sampling source from a right-wing pundit, they still struggled to get over 20% support for no. Even on the political right, people know that actually it's the right thing to do to save people from drowning.
Yes.
It is, you know, it's really easy to say it's a lost cause, because there are people who are genuinely saying some really horrible things out there, but it is also important to acknowledge that actually not everyone agrees with them, even on the ostensible same side. They disagree with the level of vitriol and hatred that is currently being targeted towards people that have absolutely no choice in what they're doing, and also are, let's face it, not impacting the national budget or the NHS or the housing supply or anything like that anywhere near as much as a lot of the right-wing pundits would like us to think.
Yeah, it's weird. In the Netherlands, we live in interesting political times. A month ago, the Dutch government coalition collapsed on the matter of asylum seekers. The government did a bit of a naughty that during the COVID-19 epidemic, numbers of asylum seekers dropped quite a bit, so they closed quite a bit of the infrastructure for that. And of course, war broke out in Ukraine, and we got several tens of thousands of asylum seekers here, and we didn't have enough place to house them. At one moment, happily in a time of good weather, they were housed in tents outside one of the centres where they are being processed for admittance. And well, that was, of course, very bad press, very nasty pictures in the paper, stuff like that. And so the government needed housing ASAP. And that is problematic, because people want, I mean, in general, we want, of course, refugees or asylum seekers, that they be housed properly, but we don't want that in our backyard. So
NIMBYs.
There was quite a bit of NIMBYism going on.
It's probably worth just saying what NIMBYism is, because you and I know that, but other people may not.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
It's an acronym, and yeah, there was quite a bit of it, and unfortunately, quite a bit of the electoral support of the largest party in the coalition, the liberal, they call themselves liberal, but it's essentially fiscally conservative with moderate social values. That electorate live more in smaller municipalities. Municipalities must do the work and for that kind of, a place where asylum seekers live. And they get paid for that by the government. But, of course, particularly in small municipalities, the locals aren't keen on having that around. And weirdly enough, that's where their voters live. So they got themselves in a bit of a spreading. And so eventually the Prime Minister's Party proposed some measures essentially to throttle the input of asylum seekers, and the other coalition parties, for different reasons, didn't like that much. And so the government collapsed. In next November, we'll have a general election, the 22nd. And something like, I think, well, for all coalition parties, the party leader has resigned. So they are electing new ones. There's been some other shakeup. We'll have rather new blood in Parliament after the election. It will be interesting. There is a small chance that we even get a lefty government or central left. I mean, very left governments are very rare. The last one I can remember was in the 70s. But it's interesting times in that. There's more to that. I mean, the Netherlands, at least since 1950s, has been a major immigration nation. Unfortunately, our government has never wanted to acknowledge that. No, we are not an immigration nation. So we didn't get ourselves an infrastructure for people to do that, how to immigrate. And so the asylum system has been used for quite a bit of that. I mean, we have rules for immigration, but still, till this day, official government policy is we're not an immigration nation. And we are, as a matter of fact. Population growth now is only immigration. Our natural birth rates and death rates are almost in equilibrium. Dean Kruger. Hello, Dean. Is there a systemic issue dealing with the volume of immigrants? If you listen to the right, it sounds like the Mediterranean Sea and English Channel is teeming with rafts full of refugees. Yes, that's how the media present it. There is some reality to that. I mean, particularly in Italy and in Greece, almost every day, both with immigrants land on their shores. Particularly in the summer when weather is nice, yes, almost daily. And terrible things happened. A few weeks ago, we had a thing in Greece where a ship sank and people drowned. I don't remember the exact details, but yes, that is. But I mean, total numbers compared to a complete EU or European population are very low. We're talking about several thousands a week. Maybe, I mean, something like maybe around 1,000 in a year, maybe a bit more, something like that. The numbers are not so bad, but for particularly Italy, it is a big strain to get those people's houses, etc. And there is some, how do you call that, EU support for that, subsidies and things, but it's not easy. And I mean, for us, of course, influx of Ukrainian refugees, they came in considerable numbers. And of course, the Netherlands is a smallish nation. I think 17 million. We're not really small, but we're not big in places to build. And that's, of course, another problem that we don't have housing for. I mean, when refugees are recognizing, yes, we can live here, we don't have housing for them. Essentially, the Dutch government doesn't like to build good, cheap housing in general. I mean, UK does the same thing, I think. I mean, let's say council housing, cheap and good. Do you have any of that? A new build, I mean. Oh, in your...
Not so much anymore. The housing targets have basically not been hit by the current government for probably the entire last 13 years that they've been in power. So they just haven't actually built stock to replace what was missing. But I think coming back briefly to Dean's question, when he was talking more generally about, is there a systemic problem? What I would say is that the problem overall from the UK's perspective is that at the moment our net immigration figure is somewhere around the 600,000 mark, which, considering we have a population of 70 million or thereabouts, is, you know, not that significant. It's, you know, under 1%. It's really not that big a deal. So in reality, any country that can't handle a 1% net migration figure on a yearly basis probably isn't doing things right. But the point is that we do struggle with that. But I think it's really important to take a look at that net migration figure, which is including all the people that have migrated to the UK, returned to the UK, less all the people that have migrated out of the UK. That figure includes the illegal migrations, or that have been defined, the refugees, the asylum seekers, whatever you want to call it. And that figure is only about 20,000 a year, which, you know, 20,000 of 600,000, it's negligible. It really isn't. It makes no difference at all. It's, you know, what, 3%. It's nothing. The amount of targeting that the government does against these very, very small parts is completely disproportionate. But it leads to the really sort of crucial point, which is actually that they deliberately, and this was a conscious decision, but they deliberately closed all of the actual legal routes for those migrants to reach the UK. So they can't go to an airport and get on a plane and come to the UK. They can't go to a port and get on a proper ferry. They can't use the Eurostar. They are forced, if they want to come to the UK and claim asylum, which they are legally entitled to do, they are forced to go via these small boats, which are incredibly dangerous, have a very high mortality rate. And now the government is demonizing that route. That, you know, they're pretty much trying to say it's the fault of the migrants for deciding to come that way. It's really not. They would probably come any other way, barring the small boat route, except for the fact that we systematically shut down every route that they could possibly come through.
Yeah. By the way, the same thing is, of course, the reason why people from Africa and Turkey go into Greece and Italy with small boats. I mean, not exactly the same small boats as we're talking about that are crossing the channel, but some of them essentially like dinghies, and definitely not a sea voyage I would like to make in any time of year, but at any kind of weather.
And that's the thing. You look at it and you think to yourself, how desperate must they be to agree to try that?
Yeah.
To agree to try a voyage of several miles on a boat that probably isn't really designed to go further than about, what, half a mile, and with less than half of the people that are piled onto it.
Yes, and certainly not seaworthy. And yes, I mean, it's a very weird political game. I mean, there is no need why there should be.
And indeed, we have had an offer from France to establish an asylum processing centre in France on French soil, so that people who wanted to apply for asylum in the UK could be assessed there without having to make the dangerous sea voyage. And our Home Secretary has refused, has decided that that is not an appropriate thing to do. That is almost, I mean, I can't really begin to say how much I hate that particular action, but to my mind, that is almost murder. That's not far off. That is condemning people to drown purely because it's not political to open an office that would save lives. I genuinely don't know how else I can sugarcoat that. It's a properly horrible. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen in UK politics, and there's nothing that I can do about it. There's nothing that anyone in the public face can do about it except to point out that this is not something that we want.
There are a few hundred men and women in Westminster who can.
No, not really, because the problem is that this is. We come back to a discussion that we've had previously, Hein, that actually the first past the post system of voting means that the government has a majority in the House of Commons, which means that whatever they decide goes. The idea of an opposition is pretty much laughable. The opposition could, for all intents and purposes, just take a holiday for the whole 5-year parliament, and it would make no difference whatsoever. The government would still have the exact same ability to push through any legislation they wanted. So the reality is that as long as this is what the Conservative MPs want, which it appears to be, that's what will happen, and there's nothing that we can do about it.
Nope. Unfortunately, so much for democracy in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, democracy. I've argued, and I'm certain that this is one of the examples that I will use. But democracy does not exist here. No. We just don't have it.
I see a question on the chat here. Hey! Hello! Does the fact that the majority of immigrants from Africa come from Islamic countries play a part in the rise of reticence? I think that's a yes.
I can offer my suspicions, but I don't know what their actual reason is. The one thing that I will say is that things changed when it was Ukraine. Because those were basically white, Christian, European, and suddenly the government decided that actually they were worth saving. They were worth setting up an asylum scheme, setting up an evacuation scheme, offering people incentives to host immigrants fleeing the Ukrainian conflict. And it was genuinely interesting when you compare that to other really dangerous conflicts from around the world that the government has taken absolutely no interest in whatsoever. It's pretty disgusting. Whatever the reason is, I have my suspicions. I suspect that because a lot of these migrants on the boats are the wrong colour or from the wrong country or have the wrong religion. I suspect that plays into it, but I am not. I'm not on the right wing. I can't say for sure what the actual motivation is. And if I'm being 100% sort of fair, I suppose, I flat out cannot say what their justification is.
Yeah, I mean, when I look to the right in the Netherlands, I mean, they are pretty much against anybody who's not Dutch. So, for instance, a few years ago, let's say before the business with Ukraine started, Poles were the bad guys. We have a considerable, a few hundred thousand Poles living and working here, completely legally because they're EU members and EU citizens, I should say. And I mean, we have a few 10,000 living in Rotterdam. I don't have much contact with them, but I meet them in the shop occasionally, and I see their own shops. I'm fine with them. They're good people, but the right doesn't like them, of course. Even though white and Christian, but they're Catholics, so it's a bit the wrong kind of white. And for the rest, yeah, well, right wingers do right wing and say right wing things, and I mean, of course, Islam and black skin is the big thing. So yes, Dean, I think, but I cannot prove that Islamic descent is one of the reasons why we're not so keen on refugees. Genevieve, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Yeah, I was kind of curious about this refugee crisis because I didn't exactly know about it. The news did not come here in India. Like I can find it probably, but it's not something that people in general know about. I wasn't even aware of the crisis.
Yeah, we got a question here for Genevieve. How does India immigration systems compare with ours in Europe?
It's a it kind of depends extremely on the government because India isn't exactly part of the UN's refugee system. Like there's some I'm forgetting the technical term, but UN has a refugee agreement that many countries are part of, but India is not part of that. So India has a great, not exactly gray area. It's really depends on the government for and where the refugees are coming from. India has a refugee problem, but it's not as serious as the other countries in topic like let's say US and the Europe and the Ukraine crisis, some parts of Africa, Middle East. Not as severe as that, but we have refugees mainly from the northeastern side, and there's a bit of you know since India is quite big and very diverse, not all parts of India gets equal amount of attention as some other parts of India. The northeastern side of entire India is quite a bit of neglected, if you say, with compared to rest of India, and people there look a bit different from what you will think an Indian looks like, and that leads to a lot of racism within India itself, and the neighboring countries, those places share borders with is Nepal and China, and so they have a little bit of similarity with the East Asian looks of the skin and the facial structure, and so people face a lot of Chinese, Nepalese, those kind of slurs, although they are brought up generation wise within India. That is a huge problem, and since we are surrounded by some problematic countries there, like there is Myanmar, and there is China, and a few other countries which go through a bit of conflict. So India currently is facing a lot of refugees from Myanmar. Bangladesh as well. Bangladesh and Myanmar is the main places where you get refugees from, and but they are not officially governed. Like there's no official system of managing the refugees. It depends on the state government how they're handling it, and depending on who the ruling government is in the state, it their reaction is very different from which political party is ruling the state at that time. And once again, religion comes into play. For example, recently the Myanmar refugee crisis came into a lot of attention compared to other crises from that area, and the refugees from there are mostly Rohingya, and the Rohingyas are Muslims. And currently, India is having a Hindu nationalist government, so they turned that whole thing into a political thing. And since most of the Rohingya refugees are coming to West Bengal, and West Bengal has a political party that is opposition to the central political party. And for the West Bengal government, uh, just for name's sake, the government is TMC, the political party, Trinamool Congress, and the ruling party is BJP, which is Bharatiya Janata Party, the like the central government. They are Hindu nationalist, and TMC is like they call themselves secular. They are a bit biased. Like they're still Hindu majority, but they have a weak point towards the Muslims, just for the sake of votes, because the central government hates Muslims, and the people who hate the central government makes being tolerant towards Muslims and the minorities as a political play against the central. So TMC is not exactly a very benevolent government. Like they are not exactly good guys. They are more like better than the central government. So they have a protective policy towards the Rohingya and the minorities, and they use that as a political play against the central, who are currently trying very hard to topple the government there. Like the central government's political party is the second largest party there. So it's entirely a political thing, and there's a lot of violence and crisis there, but no one is actually solving that. People is simply turning that into a political play.
Yeah. Sounds quite familiar. I
yeah,
mean,
it's really yeah.
making politics over refugees or immigration and things. While when you look at the numbers, they are small. I mean, they won't change your nation in any way when they all immigrate. And still, politicians, of course, tack in on that. Well, apparently, I mean, I understand a bit of that. I mean, they're coming here to take our wives and to take our jobs. I mean, that kind of rhetoric always works.
Yeah.
Here they're coming here and they're taking our healthcare.
Yes.
I kid you not, immigration is being blamed for the failure of our NHS, our National Health Service. Because basically there are a lot of people who are they're basically saying we can't handle the influx of immigration, despite the fact that a great chunk of that immigration, that net immigration, is medical personnel. It's doctors and nurses who are coming to the UK because we actually have a shortfall of those professions. So it's pretty ridiculous to argue that immigration is actually killing the NHS when immigration is absolutely crucial to the success of the NHS.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
I have
right
heard about that, because I know that a lot of that medical professional part is actually people coming from India and Pakistan. They are the two main countries, population-wise.
The lead neurosurgeon who looks after me, I have a long-term neurological problem. But the lead neurosurgeon that looks after me is of Indian descent. I think he's second generation, but rather than an actual immigrant himself. But the thing is that I am literally alive today because of immigration to the NHS, and that as a result, there is absolutely no way that I would ever say that immigration is bad for the NHS. It just absolutely isn't. It's absurd to even think that it is.
Yeah. Of course, we should also think that, I mean, yes, of course, the NHS is being killed, but so by the UK government.
Yes.
Not by immigration.
Yep. Chronic underfunding will kill off pretty much any service.
Yes. And that's a deliberate policy. That's not something that just happens.
Yeah. And the surprising thing is the UK relatively has a much better healthcare than many other parts of the world. And still they're having problems. And now what you think about countries who don't have anything as good as that, how bad they might be having.
Well, you
USA,
look
for
at,
example.
Yeah, you look at the NHS budget and you look at the fact that it has been reduced in real terms. I think we come back to every year of the last 13 years of government. I would have to double check, but it would surprise me if any year had seen real increase in the budget and the wages that are actually paid to staff for the NHS. The Tory government has obviously taken a decision that they have not announced to the electorate that they want to underfund the NHS. They want to basically see it privatised.
Yes.
And I think that's a really, really, it's starting to become a very, very dangerous reality. And it is something that we, as people who sit more to the left of the Tories, which, is sort of anything drier from the ocean, but we owe it to successive generations to save the NHS and make sure that actually the country is rescued from what is being done to it.
Yeah.
I mean, privatized healthcare can never go wrong. We have US, for example.
The thing is, we have privatized healthcare already. It just runs alongside the public service. And the thing is that done well, that arrangement makes absolute sense. It's perfectly fine for someone who wants to pay for an upgraded room. They want a room on their own instead of a bed on a ward. It's fine to allow them to do that. The problem comes from when you remove the public option and you force everyone down the route of needing to go down the private healthcare route, because at that stage, it's a literal death sentence for the people that just can't afford it. And there's the medication that I'm on at the moment. If I was paying for it myself, would probably cost maybe £2,000 or £3,000 a month. It's very, very expensive. Through the NHS,
people can afford that.
Through the NHS, I pay about £120 a year, and that covers all of my medication. So it's above and beyond just that one set of pills that I need to stay alive. So it is absolutely essential to me. It's a very personal thing for me to protect the NHS and make sure that actually it's available for me and anyone else that needs to use it.
Yeah. I mean, we organise our healthcare system a bit differently. I mean, it's through private health insurances, but they walk on a very tight legal leash. I mean, there is next to no price competition. There are very firm rules on what they have to pay for and what amounts people need to pay for. There's government subsidy on insurance for the poor, and it works reasonably well. Unfortunately, we have staffing problems that are, of course, a result of government policy, but weirdly enough, not so much in funding. That's okay, well, okay-ish. But the government refuses to make training places at universities for physicians. There's a restricted number of places. There's a lottery for students to get a place there. I mean, you would say increase the number so you get more professionals, but that costs money, and the government doesn't like to spend money, at least not on education.
So what happens if you have a need to get some of this private medical cover, but you have a pre-existing medical condition? Is it disregarded? Is it just accepted on blanket rates?
They are the companies are required to accept any applicant.
Okay.
on the same rules, on the same insurance rules.
Yeah. So that is almost single payer, isn't it? It's almost it's like paying for your healthcare out of taxes.
Yes.
But it's basically split out.
The financial streams are different, but yes.
Yeah. I think that's a perfectly workable solution, and it would solve the issue that the US is currently facing, where if you have a pre-existing condition, good luck getting medical insurance. It's just not going to happen. So basically, the people that need it the most are the ones that are left out to dry.
Yeah. How's that in India, by the way? Is there something like socialized healthcare?
We don't have a centralized healthcare, but like healthcare works in a very mixed kind of way in India. Like government has healthcare facilities, but they are not good. Like they are pretty bad in by most standards, but they do exist. And like you can get some basic things done, but you just have to keep in mind that the experience won't be good. Like it really won't be good. It's really pathetic, but it gets things done, and it's better than not having it.
Let's just put it in practicals. You have an accident, you break a leg. What do?
So we you have three options in a way. Like you have government option that does exist, but probably you have to if you go there and you get yourself hospitalized, you probably have to wait like an entire day before someone competent looks at it and stuff like that. So there is larger wait and stuff like that, which is yeah, it is kind of expected, to be honest, because you India is a very highly populated country. So almost anything that has free kind of thing attached to it, there will be a long line in it. So no matter how serious you are, you will have to wait for it. And that is understandable, to be honest. Like you are not going to a government hospital to get high level service. You're just getting things done maybe because you cannot afford it, or maybe you don't have any better option. Now, if you go to the private sector, there are in a vague way two tiers to it. The affordable one, which would be faster than the government, and you can at least get shit done much quicker and in a more trustworthy way. And that will be kind of affordable, not as cheap as the government option because it's not really subsidized. And then you have the proper private setups, which will be very expensive, but you go there and you can be assured that you sign a paycheck and everything will be taken care of. But the difference in the bills will be very high. Like let's say I have one example, like personal experience. I didn't break a leg yet. I haven't broken any bone so far, luckily. But I had a shoulder dislocation. Like I was traveling from one place to another, two districts by bike, and I made a bad move, and I fell down. I didn't exactly hit anything, but I was carrying a very heavy bag, and when I fell down, that momentum thing dislocated my shoulder, and I was in the middle of almost nowhere. And luckily I knew that someone will come. When I figured that a car is coming, I showed my my phone with the flash on. It was a police vehicle, luckily. They noticed, they helped me out, and it took me to the nearest hospital. It was the government hospital. And of course the police and those government officials won't take you to a private place unless you specifically ask them to. It's quite understandable, and I don't think there is any good private establishment at anywhere near that. It was a very remote location, and I went at it in the middle of the night. It was like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., something like that, at midnight. And naturally I was just signed in some basic identifications, and I had to wait till the morning when the actual doctor would come. Now a doctor is supposed to come at 9 a.m., that is the standard time, but the doctor came at 1 p.m. because it's a government hospital. No one cares much about it, and plus it's a remote location. It's not even a highly populated thing. Like no one is watching them, practically speaking. And then I had to wait for like 3 p.m. or something like that when I actually got to the doctor actually came to me. and then I took an X-ray and all. The whole thing took till 4 p.m. and the thing was just bringing my shoulder back in the right place. It was a 15-minute thing, but I had to wait till 4 p.m. to get it done. But on the contrary, I was there for like, in a way, you can say that I was in the hospital for a day, and it cost me just 300 rupees. While if I would have the same
How does
treatment
that
in a
compare to a day's wage?
so 300 rupees, if I convert it to pound, it will be like 3-4 pound, but that is not a fair
Oh yeah,
estimate.
that's next. That's the price of a cup of coffee then.
Yeah, but that is not a
Yeah.
fair comparison because the living expenses are different. So
Yes,
if I
Yes.
compare
so
to the living,
that's why I asked, how does it compare to a day's wage?
yeah, so if I say that a fresher corporate salary here, like someone just starting out, would be something around 30,000 rupees per month. So it's like one third of a standard salary, not a
Okay,
daily wage laborer. They probably earn much less than that because India has a.
that
So
more
that is very
fortunate.
cheap. Yeah,
Yes,
that is very cheap. That's like I'm not exactly poor, so I could have afforded something higher than that, but it's something that someone who I would say is poor can also afford. So they
that
have that
again,
option. It's good to have something that there should be
yeah,
there.
that again, being in pain for the better part of a day. I mean,
Yeah, like
dislocated shoulders are no fun.
oh yeah. When it just happened, I was in an adrenaline rush. So for a while, it wasn't that painful. But when I woke up in the morning, it was very irritating and painful. Like I avoid painkillers in general, but I think I didn't mind when they gave me two. I was like, okay, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, I bet.
Anyway, thanks for explaining this. I mean, it's difficult from the position from the West, where there is something like socialized healthcare, to know how things like that go. I mean, when
Yeah,
I break a leg, I can essentially phone for an ambulance. I will be taken to the first aid post, and I'll be fixed in an hour.
yeah, we do have that option. So the thing is, what like where it happened was, it was a very remote location. It wasn't like a city or something. I was traveling between two districts, like somewhere around 600 kilometers. So it happened in a middle point of that. That is almost nowhere. That was a big part of a problem. Like if something like that happened in a city, like where I actually stay,
Yeah, I
then
mean, I live
I have
in a city.
yeah, yeah. So I also live in a city, but that didn't happen in a city. That happened in middle of nowhere. But here I have the option of ambulances. There are like high-end private hospitals as well, middle range as well, government as well. Here I can just call an ambulance. It will be sorted in an hour or so. The bill will be very different, of course,
Yeah,
but like I have heard that ambulances in US is like $1,000-$2,000. That is ridiculous for an ambulance.
yeah.
It's
I
not a
mean,
medical
I
fees
have,
just for an
weirdly
ambulance.
enough, I have no idea what my health insurance pays for such an ambulance ride. I will never see that bill, so I don't know. But I imagine we're talking about hundreds of euros at least.
Yeah, that is see, that is not exactly cheap, but that makes sense. If
Yes,
you do the rate conversion, and euro and USD is not that different in valuation. So
no,
$1,000 is almost like £1,000. That's ridiculous for an ambulance. That's not even the medical bill. So that's what happens when you privatize healthcare without an alternative. Like privatized healthcare is fine. I feel that they should exist side by side, which is the situation in Europe, which is something ideal for now. Like it's not ideal. Ideal is a bold term, but it's a good situation to have that option. Uh, India does have that, but the thing is, the difference between private and government is way vast. Like
yeah.
it
I
shouldn't be
should
this
add
bad.
that my health insurance will pay both the ambulance ride, my admission to hospital, a surgeon fixing my leg. I mean, I never broke a leg, and I'm definitely willing to keep it that way. But no, should that happen, essentially, I would be good in a few hours, and I'll never see a bill for that. Maybe for a bit of the materials the surgeon uses to fix me up. And I mean, that stuff, there is a bit I have to pay yearly for that kind of costs. Like I pay for my medicine, my hypertension medicine I use. And because there's a maximum for all that for every year, a few €100, probably I won't pay for it.
Right.
And so that's a socialized bit of Dutch healthcare. And yes, there is a parallel, completely private system that no health insurance company will touch. If you're rich, you can afford the best healthcare money can buy. But there are no private hospitals, but there are private clinics for particular work.
There are no private hospitals?
Nope.
That was surprising. I didn't expect that, to be honest. And this is something I've seen that a lot of people don't understand. Like, there are two extreme sides to it, and both of them are pretty funny if you think about it. There's one side who expect the government hospitals to be as good as the private hospitals while charging the same, which is really impractical to expect. And on the other
That's
side,
not realistic. That's not a realistic expectation.
like, it's possible, but it's not impossible. But I feel that is a little bit of impractical expectation. It's not something you can expect because look, I don't have a very good answer for why it's not practical, but it's just this doesn't sound like a practical expectation. Like, it's expensive to maintain a healthcare and provide it at a subsidized rate. It should be there, but I don't think it should compete with the highest level of private hospital, like best of best. I don't feel that's very practical. On the other side, people see that the government healthcare is not as good as the private healthcare, so they just think it just shouldn't exist because it's not as good, which is dumb. Because just because someone can afford it doesn't mean others can. And to be honest, majority portion of the population of a country can't really afford proper private healthcare. So for them, that should
yes, I think in a modern state ensures that basic general healthcare is available for the general population at little or no cost for them, for whatever healthcare they need. That may not include the very latest innovative health novelties. I'm good with that. Anyway, we are going off topic a bit. We were talking about refugees and stuff like that. But I was genuinely curious about how things are in India. So glad that we talked about that.
I think the best of these conversations are the ones where we completely deviate and find a subject that will drive the producers absolutely nuts when they realise that we aren't talking about anything that they've wanted us to come in and talk about.
Yeah, that's true. Dean put a question in chat. At what point does humanism become more important than nationalism? I think that's a good question, but also a bit weird, because in my opinion, that has always been the case.
I have a really simple answer to it, which is that humanism always trumps nationalism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And always has.
Yeah. To my mind, nationalism is about, effectively, it's about sort of over pride in your country, which is to do with the fact that that's effectively where you were born or where you happen to have citizenship. Humanism is about accepting that actually every human around you has value, has their own set of experiences that you really ought to value and protect. And to my mind, that is so much more important than any amount of nationalism. Even a tiny amount, just having, enough pride to wave a flag of your country. If it came down to, well, do you want to pick that or do you want to save a life in the channel? For me, it's save a life every time. It really doesn't make any sort of sense to me to throw any amount of emphasis or resources or anything like that towards nationalism.
I completely
so
agree
much more important.
And I've seen that, firstly, I completely agree with that. And I've seen that it's okay to be patriotic towards your country. Like, that makes sense that you are willing to make sacrifices for your country and help it grow and stuff. But I've seen that when people take a way too much pride in being to some country, they usually do it because they don't have anything else to be proud of. I've seen that ultra nationalistic people don't really have anything else about that. Like, being nationalistic is their entire personality, and that kind of
makes sense.
Do something better with your life, man.
Yes, exactly. Better life.
Interestingly, though, what I would probably say, and this is agreeing with you, and it's saying basically what I actually think is that patriotism, this the love of country, actually is sort of a form of humanism. It's accepting that actually your country is made up of a lot of other people than yourself, and you are willing to sacrifice things about your own existence for the good of everyone else around you. But nationalism is a step beyond that. The nationalism is effectively saying, almost like, if you completely removed the population, took them off to a completely separate place, replaced them with a population from somewhere else completely, they would still have the same sense of national pride. And that's weird. That is a bit of an odd one, because effectively what they're saying is the people don't matter. It's about the country.
I don't think people
a line in the sand.
That's not my impression of what nationalists are about. It's not necessarily where they live, but their pride.
I think it does depend, because there are a number of people who would be considered nationalist here in the UK who have ethnicities that are not traditional sort of white British. So we have some that come from India, some that come from Africa, and they are as nationalist as anyone else, and it's nothing to do with where they ultimately came from. It's to do with where they think they belong in terms of society, and I really do. I think it's that that's a problem, is that they've taken a step into nationalism rather than patriotism. Patriotism would be looking after themselves, looking after everyone around them. Nationalism is doing things specifically for the country and not caring about the people of the country.
Okay, maybe I'm not a good example myself. I'm in no way a nationalist. Being raised an old-fashioned socialist, I'm an internationalist. Won't touch nationalism. And so, no, I don't have a national flag, so I can't wave one.
Well, you can wave an EU flag.
I can, but I don't have an EU flag either. In general, I'm not a flag wave.
That's something I don't do either. I mean, every country, like most countries I've seen, have some form of Independence Day or something that is for the nation someday in the year, which is for that particular country. Usually it's the Independence Day, or it's something else, something comparable to that. And you'll find during that period, everyone buys flags for a few days, some plastic shit that they wave for a day, throw away the next day. No one cares. It's like see, I'm part of this country thing. I never buy
Yeah.
a flag. I just don't care. Like for me, like I would like to contribute to India. I would like to contribute to the country, not like that. Hey, I'm Indian. See, I'm Indian. Here's a flag. There's a flag. This is my tricolor and stuff like that. That I feel to be pretty stupid. And if you go to any country with that kind of celebration, you will walk in the streets the next day. You will find like thousands of flags just thrown away or waste, like mass produced and stuff like that. Who bought those? Like, where is the
I
love
mean,
for country there?
Knowing the
It's just
When
a
history,
I-
you'll
show.
probably also find quite a lot of burnt British flags.
I mean, I'm not. I mean, I feel a bit weird about people around me waving the flag of my nation. Weirdly enough, a few months ago, we have our national holiday, the King's Day, April 27. It's our King's birthday. And our King and his mother before him visit two places, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, to celebrate. And my city was in the morning program this year, and quite a few people were there cheering the king, flags in hand. I feel slightly cringe about that. I mean, if you enjoy that, by all means do so. It's not bad in itself, but it's a bit
Yeah,
cringy.
yeah, it is, and it's there are two things to it. Firstly, that it's usually just for the show. Like people usually buy flags just for the day, and
It's
then
rather
they probably,
performative.
yeah, it's performative. And there's other thing that I'll find that now that we have a very nationalistic government, people will like find you like if let's say you are not that hyper nationalist, you are not showing that, and people will blame you that why are you not showing that, you are not supporting the country, you are
Yes,
anti-national,
exactly.
and that kind of
That's
bullshit, which is
that
very
stinks.
irritating.
Yes.
And it's a this whole nationalist thing is a very us versus them thing. Like people will always find someone they think is not part of the nation, and and their whole nationalistic idea would be surrounding their hatred for them. Like maybe they have been part of the nation as long as those quote unquote nationalists have been, but for them they're different and them are not true part of true countrymen, and that kind of hatred
Yes, exactly.
related bullshit. And that's usually the core emotions nationalisms come from. Like it's always the minorities who are not true countrymen.
Yes,
And
exactly. And I mean, the weird thing is, when push comes to shove and people really need to do something for their nation, my impression is that the nationalists aren't so good anymore.
yeah, yeah, that's true. You will find that nationalists usually celebrate the army a bit too much. Like the army can never be wrong, no matter how amount of crimes they might commit, which they usually do, not because they're part of the army, but because army cannot control every person who's part of them, and
Yeah,
stuff like that happen. But but if you point that out, they will get very mad at you that you are blaming the country, and you are against the country and stuff like that. But they will never join the army
yeah,
because there's a risk of life there. They will just sit in their comfortable place and blame people and fight with people for not supporting the army, which
yeah.
is just dumb. That's very dumb, and if you observe it from a third person view, will just find it funny and laugh at it.
Yes, exactly. Well, in short, I gladly trade an ounce of humanism for a pound of nationalism.
Yeah, happily, always.
I'll have the humanism.
Yeah, and
Um,
this is also something that the refugee crisis plays into, because for them,
yes,
refugees are just the others who are destroying the nation.
yes.
Like they are the
They
target.
are, I mean, they're, of course, for the right, they are a lovely, amorphous that. they can point at and essentially blame
just a
for
scapegoat.
everything.
Exactly, they're just
They're
something
perfect
someone
for
they
that.
can blame for.
Yes, they're perfect. They have no voice in the media. They are almost invisible because, they're not hordes. I mean, I know that a politician likes to depict them as like hordes coming to our borders and invading our nation. That's not at all the case. But yes, they're very easy to use very useful for that kind of depiction. And they won't talk back.
Yeah, they more like they can't talk back.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's a very sad vicious cycle that plays in it. Like when you put someone at the edge and they're literally fighting for their life, they will bound to do something that might not be ethical in any other context. But that minor wrongdoings, even if they're not minor, they do happen. I'm not saying that
Yes, of
doesn't
course.
happen at all. That does
Uh,
happen quite a bit. But the problem is, when that happens, the government is not actually solving that. They're not fighting those criminals. They're just using those 1 out of 10 criminals and using them to brand the entire refugee and show them as the whole refugee band as some kind of criminals trying to destroy the country. And uh, one second, just using them as a scapegoat and making that as an excuse to avoid their duties towards them,
yeah. Um,
and that makes them more at edge, which results leads to
yeah.
more such incidents, and the cycle continues.
Yep. Very much. I see that we're on a bit more than an hour. I
Yeah.
think it's about time to wrap up the show. Ian, is there anything you would like to add?
I think I've ranted quite a bit today. And I think it's fair to say that we have really let ourselves down as a country when it comes to the migrants, the refugees, and the general sort of demonization of foreigners in general. I think we have not done ourselves any favors at all. I think that we are going to spend a number of years rebuilding a reputation on the back of what we have done and how we have treated a lot of the people around us. And I think that it's an indication that there are struggles ahead. I'm hoping that we genuinely can set aside a lot of this foolish rhetoric and take our proper place in the international community again at some stage. And actually,
that would be nice.
Yeah, it would. It would be nice to not only treat others with respect, but be treated with respect back as a result.
Yes.
But we have to be doing the former before the latter happens.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yes.
I have a similar idea with the current Dutch government. We can do so much better. And weirdly enough, we haven't done better. We know how to do that. But our government chose to not put money in that, no effort whatsoever. And, November, new elections, new government. By the way, that can take months for a coalition to form. But we'll see. It'll be interesting times. Sandrith, you any comments?
Yes, and the thing is, the refugee problem is something that is actually solvable.
Yes.
So,
Won't go
so
away.
it's completely solvable. But which makes it even more disappointing that instead of solving a problem that can be solved, it's just turned into petty politics and fueling someone's hatred for votes and stuff like that. And what one more thing people fail to realize, or maybe they willingly avoid realizing, is that if you look back at history, a lot of the population of a country usually comes by escaping from some other crisis. Like a very good example would be the West Bengal state in India was divided into West Bengal and East Bengal during the partition of India and Pakistan. So a lot of people from Pakistan came into India in the West Bengal and settled here and are now part of the Indian nationality. But those people today are against the refugees of the Rohingya refugees who are escaping from Myanmar to escape a similar fate that they ran away from. So they need to put, or like they need to understand that they themselves would do the same thing, and their ancestors have actually done the same thing that those refugees are doing, and find the humanity in that and contribute to solving a problem that's really solvable.
Yeah. I mean, the short is politicians shouldn't make politics about refugees, immigration, stuff like that. I mean, they should enable that, but not make a party political thing of it. Damn, if life was so simple. I have here in my thanks for our patrons, Sidney Davis Jr., Eric Ozols, Sunny Shell, Cindy Plaza, Phil Calderone, Katie Cotton, Deborah Grace, Aaron Coalson, Michael Wiseman, Dandy, Deneen Murphy, and Tara S. Thank you for our contributors, Jena Miyu, Tang, T-A-N-G, and Randolf Richardson with Canadian Atheists. Thank you, Sanjit, for joining the show. Thank you, Ian, for telling us about the terrible state of the UK refugee stuff.
Probably a good thing that you kept me quiet, because I could have gone on.
Yes, I'm sure we will one day. Thank you for our viewers for viewing, and bye.
Bye bye.